apply a lot of pressure early in mid-game, so I expect them to go for the similar strategy as yesterday. G2, on the other hand, they just need to make sure they get a hyper carry on Hundor, have a comp that you can protect him with, but at the same time, deny SK their strongest picks.
We'll see whether they can bring that to pass. Honestly, it feels like, to some extent, yesterday's games had very similar styles between the two teams in that it was all about the carry. It was all about Hundor and it was all about K-Volifar. So I'm curious to see whether the draft just fully reflects both teams trying to get onto their carries.
Yeah, the concern I have going into this game for G2 is we saw yesterday Salty Potatoes able to win the early game against them. And SK is a team where if they win the early game, they're going to just snowball the game and make it impossible for you to come back the way that they've been playing. So that's the biggest concern I have for G2 is they really need to be careful in the early game not to give those advantages over to SK.
All right, well, game one of the day is about to kick off. We're jumping on into this draft. Lyra will be the first ban here in day number 2, and G Sports deciding how to answer this one.
I think this is something we're going to see throughout this entire update. Prioritization on roamers and captain heroes. Lyra, Catherine, Grace, and even Lance we talked about yesterday and we saw a lot of. In Europe, in the European side, there was a lot of prioritization on Blackfeather that we didn't quite see on the North American side, so I do expect this here again. Celeste is another character that's one of the strongest laners that you don't want to give away unless you have a strategy to play against. So these are the prioritizations. Catherine comes for SK.
Yep. And like I said yesterday, I really like when teams go for this Lyra first ban, just because it almost will always draw out a Grace ban, and you can then grab Catherine, or if they don't ban the Grace, you can get Grace if they ban the Catherine, or if they just try to go a different direction, then whatever, you get one of the two. Like, it's an even trade, so it's just a really smart A-side ban.
Yeah, the Lance coming on through. We've talked about how this is kind of a flex pick for G2 Esports. We know it can go into the captain role, but Dark Potato is known for his weapon power. Lance coming out of the jungle. Batiste going to be the ban.
You can
kind of
always,
unsurprising.
Yeah, you can expect that once Catherine is picked up on the A side, you're either going to pick it or ban it. Although I've seen some teams prepare strategies to counter it and bait teams into picking the Baptiste Catherine and just play against it to execute their strategy. Not everyone feels confident doing that though. So SK Gaming, it's either going to be a Blackfeather ban perhaps or Celeste. If they leave Celeste open, it's good for them because they would want to combine it with the Catherine. So maybe more likely a Blackfeather ban or a Cruel ban just because he's so strong.
Yeah, both of those are obviously highly contested picks at the moment. The Blackfeather ban I think would make a little bit more sense because if you want to run the Celeste, you don't want your opponents to take the Blackfeather, but then at the same time, if you do ban away the Blackfeather, that invites G2 to take the Celeste for Hundor. So maybe SK even just bans the Celeste away instead and just takes that off the board because we know how good Hundor can play with that hero.
To see where they are going to go with this one. SK using basically all of their bonus time on this ban. It is going to be Cruel taken off the board now, which means G2 have to decide where they want to go. And it's interesting that you would ban a jungler in this situation as well, because G2 can still flex that Lance into the jungle position.
G2 almost have to take Celeste here. If they give it over to SK with Catherine, that's going to be a scary comp to go up against. And since they have 2 picks, if G2 doesn't pick Blackfeather either, they could take Celeste and Blackfeather, run Blackfeather in the jungle as weapon power. It's unlikely, but it's a strong composition that SK would be rounding.
Yeah, the Celeste will be picked up as well then.
I feel like SK almost has to take the Blackfeather here. You need something that can get onto that backline, get onto the Celeste, and get in her face. And Blackfeather, it has been throughout challengers and a little bit of yesterday. I think we only saw it once in that matchup of a weapon Blackfeather versus Celeste. But Blackfeather is one of the strongest counters to the Celeste currently.
Yeah, and Blackfeather has been something that we've seen locked in time and time again here in Europe over the course of yesterday. We've seen quite a bit of Glaive as well. It's not really been seen in this draft specifically, but that could be a final pick for G2 later on in the draft. Now SK have to decide where they want to go with this.
If G2 find the opportunity, they might pick Finn last just so that they can round the comp with Celeste, Lance Jungle, and Finn. It's a composition they play very well. Just protect the Hundor composition. Idris CP picked up by SK. We talked about how strong of a pick this is for K-Volifar. It's scary looking for G2, but let's see where their last pick is. If it is a Finn, then they have an extreme range advantage with the Celeste beyond level 8, and they can use that to their advantage.
And I feel like if they lock in the Finn here, it's like a classic from esports in general, not even specific to one genre, where you have one protect the carry composition and one
kill
very
the carry
hard dive
composition.
composition. It's like a classic from across multiple games. The Finn is going to be locked in. We're going to see Hundor trying to hyper carry, and we're going to see SK trying to dive onto that backline.
Yeah, and I looking at these two compositions, I just have to really favor SKs because obviously with the protect the carry composition, you have to be able to CC your opponents and prevent them from getting onto the carry. Black Feather ignores all of that. You know, you have Idris who can, can use his ultimate to avoid a lot of that crowd control and just jump onto the backlines as well. It's going to be extremely difficult. Even though Lance and Finn are two of the best protection-based heroes, it's going to be really tough for them to actually keep Hundor safe on the Celeste.
I mean, SK can win it, but only if they get ahead mid-game, in my opinion. If G2 manages to get to the level 8 with Celeste and apply a lot of pressure from that point on, they can get a huge gold lead with it just because they have such a big range advantage. But CP Idris is still an extremely strong late game carry, and if he gets to his full build, it can go either way.
All right, we'll see whether SK can have that onus on them and drive that game forward. And I mean, that's kind of what we've known SK for, though, right? Being proactive in the early game, trying to make things happen. That's exactly what their composition is looking to do. The question is, are we going to see a lot of that priority around the middle of the map? It's something we were talking about earlier on. Are we going to see these teams adapting to fighting for this early Elder Tree?
We absolutely should, because both Lance and Blackfeather have very quick early clears. And obviously, Finn is very strong level 1. Catherine can also be an incredible asset to your team if you get that stun onto the Lance and Blackfeather jumps onto him. You can win those trades, but both teams should be feeling confident in their level 1 fight, and I think we might actually see that level 1, level 2 skirmish.
All right, we'll see if we're going to see that coming through in this game. It's time to kick off the broadcast. Hashtag Vainglory8 on Twitter to let us know who you are supporting, jumping into this very first series of the day. But it's time to pass it over to our casters. It's Dowsy and the Source. Take it away, guys.
Thank you very much, Munchables. Here we are, the Halcyon Fold. Two of the European powerhouses heading up against each other to try and get that pole position here in Europe. G2 versus SK, and these composition Source are very exciting.
Yeah, I don't think we could have gotten a better draft for both high impact variants in where the teams are going to be over the course of the game, and plenty of action going to come out of both these squads.
Very excited to see kind of the way this game develops, because if you look at, like the desk was saying, a Lance and a Blackfeather both have very good skirmishing ability, able to take those 1v1, 2v2 fights fairly consistently, both able to delete a hyper carry Idris or Celeste from the map. But then in the late game you have these hyper carries to try and push the boat forward. So it really is going to be about position, map rotations, and who can kind of get the better team fight start.
Yeah, we had a 3-man jungle start instead of a 2-man jungle start, so SK just decided to send Kvalifar off into the lane, or well, no, they had Hegman making a little bit of trouble, ran to Nakoa, and Nakoa backed up a little bit to pick up a bit of farm, and so we're seeing some variance in how these jungle starts are coming out between the two teams, and now we're back to this very aggressive, very safe laning while they leave the junglers off to solo.
One thing that I think it kind of separates SK from G2 is the way that they G2 decides to spread its gold around the map. G2 very happy to send Hundor towards the back camps to share gold between Hundor and Dark Ghost, sacrifice it, something that they have been well known to do back in spring when G2 had such a strong run becoming the European champions of the Vainglory8. And right now, I think that's kind of the difference between the two teams, is how comfortable they are. You see them grouping up in the mid. Hegman going to face check a Bush. He's in a lot of trouble. Stunned up, dead. First blood goes to Dark Potato and G2 to get an early lead.
Yeah, and that's going to be the first taste of G2 CC, absolute CC control. They have so much crowd control to use over the course of a given fight. And for a minute there, I thought Tyrus had stolen that away. And I like the fact that G2 rotated all members down. Yes, they lose a little bit of that lane farm, but even if they don't manage to get that kill, they're more than willing to share this new ambient golden experience coming out of the jungle, and probably to put the extra regen onto Hundor, give him the last hit, so that he can walk back into the lane and be ready to continue the farm. And
Heavy invading the jungle here, seeing what he can find. Good quiver comes out of Kian and Nakoa to stop any more forward aggression. Pyra's sitting behind on those last hits, meaning that Dark Potato getting the better of it all, and is moving into lane, looking for Kvalifar, putting the pressure onto this CP Idris, though Hegman and Tyras will move up to try and relieve some of that. Kvalifar sitting a little bit low, has to be very careful, especially when level 8 comes around for this Celeste. That's when she kind of becomes this really nice counter to the Idris.
Yeah, and that was a decent invade timing. They had the wave push up. Kvalifar had a perfect vision of Hundor. They knew they could go in and do that. And, you know, that little bit of jungle farm that steal away is going to result in them also getting that treant, a little bit more pressure, and that's going to make up for the initial death by Hegman. It doesn't completely negate the gold difference. As we can see, there is a bit of an advantage there, but it will at least keep the members of SK in the game, keep them moving around the board, and be ready for the next team fight.
So, currently, let's look at the items that are being purchased here. Yesterday, we saw Kvalifar pick up that Frostburn on the Idris. I do wonder if he will opt in perhaps for a Shatterglass in this game. I think it's probably going to be more beneficial to the Idris. The last game, you know, there was definitely an argument to be made for Frostburn over Shatterglass. A lot of melee threat that if you slowed down could give you an advantage, and that's how SK were able to keep their opponents at bay. But in this game, I'm not sure it's the same story. Tyra's in a bit of trouble. Hegman will go in to stop Dark Potato aggressing. There's going to be SK roaming on down. Kvalifar has the gold for a Shatterglass. Hundor completing an Eve of Harvest early shows that he's not really looking for early fights. There it is, Frostburn again. So Kvalifar really does just favor the Frostburn on CP Idris.
I'm with Kvalifar on this one. Even if you don't necessarily need the heavy amount of kiting, even if there aren't that many, you know, heavy diving melees that you have to worry about, you know, Finn's not that mobile. If you can continuously kite him around, you're going to be able to get additional damage. Once that Broken Myth comes out, the stacks are basically going to be free. And it's also pretty good for dealing with the Lance. If you can kind of slow and set Lance off pace, it's really easy for somebody to miss an impale. And then that really, you know, just slows down what Lance is going to be able to do and makes him vulnerable.
D2 looking to come on in here. Dark Potato didn't look like he wanted to go for that impale. Idris can be fairly good into Lance. If you're timing your Shroud Step correctly, you can roll away from it, avoid those impales coming in. So the benefit of surprise is going to have to be used, I think, but there's so much CC. If you can get him up against the wall, it works out. But Hegman dives on in, makes sure that there will be no stuns coming on to Kvalifar. Hegman, a player that I think has surprised a lot of people here on their fold. Most people going to remember him as Red Action from Cyclone. Played with them during the spring Vainglory8 season. Had a break, now back. New name, new me, new team, and he's been performing outstandingly.
Yeah, aside from that one face check at the beginning of the game, we've seen Hegman have pretty good game sense as to where to be and when to be there to protect his teammates. And I like, you know, that fight was about to start up in the lane. Hegman just lands the stun and says, no, we're not even going to consider picking this fight. It's not advantageous for us. It doesn't look good. And, you know, if you have a player who's willing to make those types of plays, you're usually going to be very safe as a carry. And we've seen that SK is very confident in letting Kvalifar, you know, kind of run the table. We'll see whether or not they can make that happen in this game. CP is going to take a little bit longer before he's online.
Yeah, same with this Celeste here. Currently Hundor building towards the Frostburn, has the gold for it, will purchase it. And one of the interesting dynamics that I think SK is going to have going for it is, you know, a tweet from Raph earlier on this week was, I'm not going to be playing in week 1, but I'll be back in week 2 for SK. So there's rivalry now established between these two captain players, both going to be fighting for that starting role. And that can really drive some friendly competition, some, you know, friendly need to improve and be the better captain for the team. So for SK, this can really benefit them, I guess, in the long run, and their bid to becoming the European representative at Worlds.
Yeah, and there's two kind of sides to that coin. One, you get the rivalry, you get the ability for you to be able to talk, have another person on the team who knows your strategies, knows your play styles, and you can kind of converse about that. But we've got to...
Tyras is well caught out here. He is in so much trouble. Hegman not in range for the fountain. Holds onto it though, knowing that he wasn't able to save his jungler. That's the risk, I guess, of counter jungling without full-on vision control, without support from the team.
Yeah, it looks good for a moment. Ooh, Force the Cord being used and the Blast Charmer to answer back. Hegman will use that ultimate to kind of deter the motion of the side of G2. SK, they can kind of continue to poke and prod as long as those chakrams are landing. Even if Hundor is kind of at full health, one good chakram and that's Hundor at half. Kvalifar gets hit.
He's at level 8 now, which is becoming a bit of an issue. It's that power spike for Celeste. The Heliogenesis extended range now up to 9 from 7, which provides the sieging aspect for G2, and it makes things very difficult for this Idris.
Yeah, 1k-ish gold down is the side of SK, so they're not super far behind. They should be able to easily make a comeback with a good team fight. But as I was saying before, that kind of dual, having two players at the position, yes, they can work with each other and kind of, have somebody on the team to strategize with, but it can change the team's play style. And we'll see, which one of them ends up becoming more dominant and which play style tends to be more effective.
Okay, so we have that alternate current now available for Kavalafa. Hundor very close to hitting his 3-item spike with that clockwork, which just makes Celeste so hard to deal with. The Heliogenesis off cooldown practically at a second's notice means that you can really do extra damage with the Supernova when you pop it on the same spot. There's the issue that SK are going to be facing in this game. They kind of require a solid engagement from Hegman and Tyrus, but the front line from G2 and G2's ability to play around Hundor are just so good. It's going to be really difficult for SK to even get on top of this Celeste.
Yeah, and on top of that, they also have to deal with the fact that Nakoa has shown very, very good skill on the Finn in the last 2 days, including this game as well. So you have to worry about kind of getting around that pillar of crowd control, and it's just going to be difficult for Kavalafa to really get around him. I think once the broken myth comes through, maybe we see a little bit more confidence out of SK. Hegman hasn't really been able to look for any of those flanks, find an angle. They also have, they've been fairly safe in where they've been willing to position. Yes, there have been some very cheeky jungle invades, but other than that, they haven't really pushed up too far in the lane up until now.
Yeah, no, I think currently what I'm seeing is, an energy battery in Hegman's inventory, probably alluding to the fact that he wants to get an Echo online for the double blast tremor. If he's able to sync that up with a broken myth, if Tyrus is able to get his second damage item online and a bit extra defense, then actually SK will be in a fairly good spot for a fight. But they're going in nonetheless. Tyrus looking for Hundor, a bit of damage, but a good amount of CC stops up Tyrus. There's going to be a disengage, blocked the Force of Cord Hegman. And a good dodge on the Solar Storm as well. Kavalafa safe for now, but still has to be cautious. SK looking to try and re-engage the fight, but Kavalafa an accidental backward chakram, and Tyrus taking far too much damage to really be in this fight. It is very difficult for SK to get on in there, and they just don't have the damage yet, though. A good start. Hegman goes in. There's no follow-up from SK at this moment, but Hegman with the Storm Guard bubble able to take up a lot of damage and reduce it. Going to be okay for now, but the siege for G2 going to be hard to deal with. Hegman, another great start with Kavalafa, a supernova onto him, forces him back, and Hegman stuck on the front line trying to get out. Much a game of inches at the moment, Source.
It is an absolute minefield for the side of SK. Anytime they step forward, they've done a really good job throughout that fight of kiting, getting crowd control. Oh, Hegman
no.
might be in trouble.
Does look like he is in trouble. He's going to stun up Hundor, but I don't think he escapes this. Oh, maybe he does. No, never mind. There it is. The Heliogenesis comes through to find the third kill here for the side of G2. They are going to backport. SK, what are they going to do? Can they take the gold miner is the question. No, it doesn't look like they're going to be able to. So instead, going to be sharing golden experience to try and get Kavalafa closer and closer to that broken myth.
Yeah, that was a very long, drawn out engagement back and forth repeatedly. Both teams got off their fountains. Something to note, there is no poison shiv in this game, at least not yet. Tyrus might build one, and so there wasn't any healing reduction. So there's full value on all of that sustain. It took a very, very long time, but oh my god. Kavalafa gets dropped to half off of one supernova, and that is really the problem SK is running into. They can't get too far forward lest Hundor drops too many Heliogenesis behind them and there's no escape, and they haven't been able to fully engage on them, but that's some solid damage on Hundor.
Really solid damage. He's stunned on up. He's in a bit of trouble. Silence, and there it is. They found Hundor. Kavalafa first kill of the game. Kiana Nakoa now in trouble. He is going to go down, and it looks like they want to find the ace for themselves. Dark Potato trying to escape, but Kavalafa with a Frostburn coming up, drops an ace. Comes through for SK. They're going to get this turret and look for the gold miner as well.
They find Hundor, and everything comes together for the side of SK. They finally manage to dish out enough damage. That was a well-timed blast tremor from Hegman right in the middle of the team fight, and I think that, yeah, the Crucible was not used, so they didn't manage to block that out. That was perfectly timed from SK, and ooh, Cavalifar. That might have been devastating if he had gone down.
Yeah, Solar Storm rips through him, as this replay is showing. You just see SK taking over the fight, and it was kind of the positioning in that top bush that allowed the first chakram to hit the Frostburn as well. This is where Cavalifar makes a case for Frostburn. If that chakram does connect with Hundor, then the ability for Hegman and Tyrus to get on into the fight quickly and provide extra slowing, extra CC disruption is pretty huge. So the Frostburn, hey, the argument continues. Cavalifar certainly making a good case. Has this broken myth online now. I have to see how SK reacts. It's Tyrus dumping on it. Lots of damage on the Hundor. Deleted instantly. And now Dark Potato's in trouble as well. Cannot escape. It's a double for Tyros, the player that made names for himself, now moving to try and find Keanu Nakoa as well. SK wanting another ace for themselves, and I don't see a reason that they can't get it. Here it goes. Tyros looking for his triple. He'll get the ace for his team. The sentry will go down, and SK are in the driver's seat.
The game was slow and steady, and all of a sudden SK have turned up the speed. Now that that first turret was down, I mean, the second turret is down as well, but they were so far up the side of G2 to be that confident that they could take that fight. And the moment that Cavalifar showed up, they were willing to engage, land a chakram, and start things off again. It's just getting so difficult for the side of G2 to stand in position and really set up that siege that Hundor wants. Until I think maybe, actually, I'm not sure what item spike would really help them. Maybe Keanu Nakoa gets the Echo and they can start setting up some double forced accords, but that requires them to be in position for the start of those fights.
Currently, Dark Potato's damage is lacking a little bit, has the components for the Sora Blade, but it is all on positioning, I think, here for G2. Hundor cannot afford to get hit by a chakram, cannot afford to allow Tyros or Hegman to get into that melee range. So the front line for G2 has to be strong and fast, has to be able to withstand. Dark Potato has himself an Aegis and a second reflex block, probably going towards a Crucible for his team. There it is, the block double. There's the Echo coming through. Cavalifar trying to move on in, trying to get onto Hundor, but a huge block comes through, a stun. Can they stop? Yes, they can. Force Accord comes through. Solar Storm hits Cavalifar, and that's a kill to Hundor. It's gone wrong for SK, as Hegman will go down. Tyrus as well. A triple for Hundor, and that position comes up trumps.
Perfect positioning out of Hundor, retreating back into the jungle. I'm surprised that he managed to survive that. I thought the Solar Storm was going to come out, but then the double core collapse. Now let's look at this again in the replay. You see there was an echoed blast tremor, but that core collapse on the side right next to the tree, and it's perfect. The double force the core pulled him back in, and then a Solar Storm across the side to get Cavalifar. And it looks like Tyrus might have been able to pick something up, but the Crystal Sentry is there backing up the side of G2, and they're able to pick up the triple, and now they have gotten themselves a Kraken as well.
Incredible turnaround there for G2, and it just goes to show, if Hundor survives in the fight, then it's going to mean huge things for G2. Like you mentioned, perhaps it's just that front line. The Echo could come through for Keanu Nakoa very shortly, has that energy battery, void battery to build into it. And if he gets that Echo, then it's going to be even more CC disruption. Very difficult for SK to fight in those tight corridors. You mentioned it once before, twice before, a million times it seems. Do not fight lands in the jungle. It just doesn't go well for you. SK do suffer for it. Trying to whittle down this Kraken, trying to keep G2 off of it. Tyrus has to be careful, he doesn't go too deep here. Was going to be pulled back in, able to dodge away from the impale. Good usage of the Rose Offense, but he's so low. SK need to get back to this turret before Hundor gets in there. So difficult to fight a Celeste in these tight area of the map, and look at that. Keanu just walks on in. Cavalifar gets stunned up. That's the choke point turret going, and G2 going to be very happy with that.
Yeah, they've managed to make a huge comeback in terms of the gold. Everything is back to even. They now have advantage in terms of structures. They've managed to take down that additional turret, but there is still potential for Cavalifar to pop off. He could get in just a huge amount of damage. The problem is G2's not allowing for those types of team fights to happen. They're forcing SK to fight them on the run, which isn't a terrible situation for SK team comp, but as long as Hundor can continue to back up, can drop those Heliogenesis, add in that damage, that slow, get the supernovas off, it's really difficult for SK to actually lock him down. They need to take Hundor out pretty much instantly, and then the team fight breaks open for them.
Yeah, the broken myth on the Celeste, the Supernova doing roughly 600 damage to Cavalifar every time it hits. Definitely an issue, and there's the battle of hyper carries, the battle of a frontline. Yeah, SK, the aggressors constantly in this game. G2 once more playing around their superstar. It's been said so many times by some of the best in North America that G2 is a fierce carry to play against, and you can see why G2 constantly play. Great block comes through. They have a second Crucible on Dark Potato for the second Blast Tremor. In fact, Hegman used his Blast Tremor before the Echo was even available, so there won't be a second one coming through. And that's going to mean for SK, a 40-second lull you would feel before they look for another fight.
I mean, they can find something, especially if they get huge damage on the Hundor.
Ooh, huge damage on the Hundor indeed. It's going to be Cavalifar looking for the re-engage, but look, Hundor, he's so far away. SK have to be careful how they treat this, looking to stack up to Kiana and Nakoa, but look at the damage that can come out of Hundor with those Supernovas already set up. G2 going to be happy enough to disengage, but does mean for SK they've done a lot of work. They popped a lot of cooldowns, and not only that, they've got their Blast Tremor coming up in just 10 seconds.
Yeah, they got a lot of activates, but the ultimates are still up. That Solar Storm is still there, have to be worried about that. Forced Accord was not used. The Echo is still there for Kiana Nakoa, so that double, the double Quibble, double Flight Company, both of those are possible, and that might be the double Quibble that is more valuable than the double Forced Accord, just because that extra crowd control to stop Cavalifar from moving around too much.
Ooh,
that was a Crucible pop.
It was a Crucible pop, and it's Cavalifar in a bit of trouble. There's the Crucible going out. There's the second silence, though. It's Hundor looking like he's in trouble. Oh, Tyrant shuts him down, deletes him, and Cavalifar moves in to fight Dark Potato as well. It's only Kiana Nakoa left for G2. They've done it. SK playing around the fact that the Fountain was used by Kiana Nakoa, and whilst Tyras deals with Kiana Nakoa, the rest of the team looking to take down the choke point turret, and Keanu will fall. It's only a matter of seconds as Tyras is just buying time. He wants the death timers to be stuttered. He wants to get the ace at the last second. This is terrible, and Kiana Nakoa, I like this, kills himself by going to the Kraken to get his death timer back off cooldown as quickly as possible. But SK have taken so much. They've taken 2 turrets. They've got this Kraken on board. Hundor not able to get on top of Cavalifar. A good Shimmer Strike stops him from dying. And SK are going to find themselves a Kraken and look to finish the game.
They do need to be careful about the possible Solar Storm steal. That could take out Tyrus if he's in the wrong position. Hegman should kind of, position towards that aggressive side. But now that Cavalifar is here, they will be able to easily pick up the Kraken, and that was just a great, early team fight. Once that Fountain was down, once all those activates were used, it didn't look like SK would really want to take another team fight, but they finally managed to get tires on Hundor. There wasn't enough crowd control to be able to peel him off, and they were able to pick up that kill and then snowball out the fight. And pretty much as soon as Hundor goes down, things get out of control.
I love this last purchase from Hegman, a Storm Crown for Catherine. SK are convinced that this is the last team fight of the game, that this is the last push for them. So any extra objective damage they have is going to get them towards that Game 1 win. And Hegman going to be looking to provide that, the true damage, as Storm Crown provides. A huge Blast Drum comes through, the Echo goes out as well. SK moving on in, Hundor on the front line is going to get in trouble. Cavalifar moving on in, Shimmer Strikes over. Hundor, he's still alive somehow, but Tyra's looking to finish the job. It's a trade 1-for-1, but the Kraken, she's on the Vein Crystal turrets, and Hegman's Storm Crown is doing the damage. SK have done it. They've cracked open G2, and they're going to take Game 1 of this series.
A well-played game by SK, especially to be able to prioritize targets really, really well. I think that's really how they were able to make it through all that defense, because we saw what happened when a team fight failed. They couldn't get through enough of the damage onto the tanks, and Hundor was able to continuously kite them. But as the game went on, SK was able to finally find those targets.
Incredible play from SK. Hegman finishing with 54 stacks on Catherine, something we just don't see in competitive. SK take game 1. Let's throw it back to our desk to break down that SK win.
Thank you very much, guys. My name is Munchballs, and I'm joined once again by Tasty Bacon and Iraqi Zora, and we're going to break down that game just a little bit more. And that was an excellent game coming out from SK, but honestly, incredibly high-quality Vainglory across the board out of both of these teams. G2, I feel like stepping up to a level that we just didn't get to see from them last season.
Yeah, both of these teams played incredibly well. The protect the carry composition from the side of G2 was able to do a pretty good job of keeping Hunter alive, but unfortunately, just that hard dive, the massive amount of damage that comes out from a Black Feather and an Idris when they're able to get finally past the Finn and the Lance was just a little bit too much.
I mean, honestly, it was back and forth. So I would say both teams made a lot of mistakes when they had the lead to throw it. SK grabbed the lead after G2 was getting too close, and then once they did throw it by making a team fight that's not so correct. This is the first team fight that we see SK get ahead, and it was due to because Kvalifar, he was playing a little bit sneaky in the bush. He got Celeste down to 30% of her health before the teamfight even started. So once they engaged and the silence came through, Keanu made a mistake not to block it with his Crucible, and we talked about how Keanu needs to step up in this series to win it. Not a great performance from him game 1, and that's how SK managed to get in the lead in the first place.
Yeah, there were a couple other team fights like this one here. Again, able to get onto Hundor, take him out. Once Hundor is down, the rest of this composition just kind of falls apart. The Lance and the Finch don't have enough damage between them or enough mobility to keep up with a Black Feather and an Idris. It's very difficult for them to actually land any of the damage.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we do have the Weatherman on board with us here on broadcast. And we're going to take another look at one of the fights that happened just beyond the 15-minute mark and break it down in a little bit more detail. So, Suijay, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Munchballs. And this is a fight that I was super excited to see. You can see here, G2 is kind of playing defense, and SK is playing some offense. We're going to roll the clip here and show what happens. You can see Catherine's going to land a beautiful silence, and then the echo comes out, and a double silence happens here. And you can see that they're onto Hundor here. He's getting really low. And then there's a key part in the fight right here. We're going to pause it right here. They use the Crucible, right, to block the Celeste core collapse. The root comes out, and then the fin pull. You can see the fin pull right here, and then the root is also on top of them. And that basically is able to protect Hundor. I mean, look how low he is. Look at his health, and look at all of the abilities used. Catherine already used all the fountain, right? The block's already used here, so she doesn't have Crucible to block this fin pull. And that's a win condition that G2 is able to execute, save Hundor. And you can see here, everyone has used all their abilities. So this was a critical moment in the fight that turns it completely around. And then we're going to roll from here and see basically Celeste is able to keep her distance, Lance protects her, and then the ultimate lands on Kvalifar, and they just clean up the rest of the fight. So you can see how it's important that your Crucible needs to be saved for the right moments. And if Catherine had that Crucible to block the root and the pull, it may have turned out different for SK, but they did manage to seal the deal at the end of the day and win that game. So we're going to throw it back to the desk. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much, Suijay. Excellent analysis as ever, but definitely a great fight coming out for G2. Wasn't enough for them to take the game, but you can see that there is serious promise for this team.
Yeah, and something worth mentioning in that team fight, the Crystal Sentry in this update, it has a decaying slow. So when SK chased the Celeste back into the Crystal Sentry, that Crystal Sentry was helping Celeste peel away, and it did a lot of work for her to get away and manage to live a little bit with that health.
And one other thing about that fight that didn't get touched on too much was the ultimate coming from Hundor. That whole fight was kind of on this like almost L-shaped angle, and he chose to throw it not into the bulk of the team fight, but off to the side, specifically where Kvalifar was. He was only aiming for that one target, nailed him, got the kill, and that was the important kill to take. Because if he throws that into where Black Feather and Catherine are, they don't win that team fight.
Yeah, absolutely. Making sure to pick those targets. Now let's take a look at the final fight that ended this game in favor of SK Gaming and see how things panned out for them, how they were able to take control of the situation, because I feel like a lot of this replay is going to be all about the Black Feather.
Yeah,
the Black Feather here, you can see him. So the silence ended up landing, but he doesn't use the second silence until later on so that he can get it mid the team fight. It gets blocked, but the Black Feather is so good at sticking to Celeste. You just can't shake him off until you kill him, and by that time CP Idris has taken over the damage for the team fight, and he just cleans up. At that point he was full build too.
Yeah, and again, it comes down to if the Celeste goes down in this composition, you can see it. They just kind of, like, it was almost like a deflation. They knew once Celeste was down, they just didn't have the damage to find the kills and take out the Kraken. Their only chance was keeping Hunter alive there, and Black Feather is just so good at getting onto that target and making sure to stay on that target.
Yeah, I feel like this is one of the disadvantages of having that Lance in the composition as your jungler, in that it's great in the early game and it's great if you can protect your carry, but the second that one lane carry goes down, you don't have the damage to carry the rest of the team fight. You're not really in a DPS role fully in the same way that you've got with the Black Feather and the Idris. So just a singular threat, and if it's eliminated, that's going to be the game for you. And SK now taking advantage in the series. So looking towards the next game now, what is it that G2 need to do to try and pull themselves back in? Can they just go on another protect the Hundor composition, or do they have to change their tune?
I mean, I personally liked G2's draft, especially because they had the stronger early game and mid game, and they had longer range late game. It's just that they didn't play to their win condition. They started getting too close. Celeste was kind of on the front line, and that's when she becomes easy to pick off. So the draft is not the problem. They can do the same thing. They just need to play it better.
Yeah, for me, it's you can run a protect the carry composition, but if you are, you need to prevent your opponents from getting Black Feather. I think Black Feather just blows up the protect the carry compositions single-handedly almost, because of the fact that he can ignore so much of the crowd control and just get onto the back line regardless of what you have against him.
Yeah, I mean, we saw Black Feather being a really big focus with the second rotation of bans yesterday. I feel like that's a great example as to why he was such a focus with how good Celeste is in the meta, and Scarf as well. Similar situation between him and Black Feather. Catherine, though, going to be the first ban as we head towards this second game now, and Grace going to be the answer.
They don't want to deal with the Echo Silence again. I mean, yeah. Keanu, he couldn't even block the first Silence that didn't have an Echo, so you don't need to put so much pressure on him if he's not performing great. Just take off the pressure a little bit, allow him to come back again into the series. Grace is banned, but they don't choose to go for Lyra, they go for Lance instead, and I think that's more of a comfort pick for G2 because they can flex it.
Yeah, having the ability to flex that pick is so important. Taking a first pick where your opponents don't necessarily know what you want to do at all is so important. And so SK Gaming now, I would expect them to maybe go for the Lyra, but obviously, again, with how many teams are focusing the Finn, thought that might be an option. But they say, you know what? We know you're going to try and ban away this Black Feather if we don't take it here. So they take the Black Feather. This just blows up. Like, if G2 was trying to go that protect the carry composition again, that completely blows it up. They have to change their strategy.
However, the Lance is a flex pick, so they can still change their strategy. It's not already over for G2, but definitely you don't get to go for that same Celeste composition that they maybe would have liked. And now G2, I mean, could you even consider just banning away the Celeste now that you know that you don't want to play it?
I almost think you have to, because SK have that Black Feather, and that's the hardest counter to the Celeste, and they have it on their side. It's kind of like the Catherine Idris type of thing, where, you know, it's the strongest counter of it. If you have the strongest counter to this, and what is considered by a lot of players one of the stronger heroes, you are just going to be golden, and there's not too many answers I think that G2 could pick up. But the question then becomes, does Kvalifar run that Celeste to the same level? Because it's not really the type of hero we see him play often.
I do like the Idris ban a little bit more than the Celeste, just because Kvalifar has been performing great on the Idris, and he's just such a strong late game carry. Celeste, you might be able to get on her and kill her. Idris is a little bit more mobile with his A ability, so he can get around your abilities if he needed to. What's scary here is if SK pick up the Lyra, they now can flex their last pick into either a Celeste or a jungler and putting Black Feather in lane. So that's what I was going to say, and Lyra is a really strong pick.
Yeah, and I like the fact that they grabbed the Lyra instead of the Celeste there, because it's almost challenging, saying, G2, are you comfortable enough to try and take the Celeste? Now they can take it as their last pick if they want, but they get to see the entire G2 composition first, and it is going to be that Fortress and Vox. Again, a little bit of flexibility with the Lance and the Fortress, but I would expect this to be still Dark Potato on the Lance.
No, I actually think it's going to be Fortress in the jungle. This is the composition we saw yesterday with Vox, Fortress CP with the tension bow aftershock proc build and Lance in the roaming position. It's a very strong build or comp, especially if Vox goes for the double TT breaking point build where he has so much attack speed that he can proc those bleed.
Yeah, I almost forgot about that build actually because we saw it very early. I think it was the first game of the day that we saw it, and it hasn't come through yet. But then, or since then. But then Scarf going to be for SK. So similar to the Celeste, but a little bit more of the AOE, and I think that's largely for when those Fortress Wolves come out. You throw a Spitfire out, it can hit all 3 Wolves potentially.
Yeah, and I like Scarf better than Celeste here just because he's a lot stronger at kiting away Fortress. When Fortress Wolves come at you, the Spitfire goes through them all. It deals damage to all 3 of those Wolves and helps you get rid of them early on in the team fight. So I like it against this comp over Celeste.
And not only that, but the goop to be able to keep them off you. Obviously, Fortress is really good at trying to get him and his teammates onto someone. You throw down a goop right in front of you, makes their job a lot more difficult.
All right, so we've looked at the whole compositions. Obviously, very aggressive composition coming out from G2. That's a very different style to what we're used to seeing from this team, though. Are we expecting this to be perfect execution? Do we expect G2 to be like on the front foot during the early game? Because that's not what we usually see from this team.
I think they can't with Fortress against Blackfeather. Blackfeather is really good at dueling in the jungle. If they manage to get ahead, it would be great for them because it would allow them to play as aggressive as they need to. But if they don't, SK's composition is going to have much longer range and so much sustain that they can just keep sieging turret after turret, and whenever G2 tries to engage, they just peel back. And you have the bulwark too from Lyra, such a great disengage tool.
All right, we'll see if they're going to be able to go for those disengages, how these fights are going to be happening. I'm excited to see this one coming on through. Different style coming out for G2. SK, they looked great in game 1, but G2 certainly gave them a run for their money. Hashtag Vainglory8 on Twitter to let us know who you're supporting. But it's time for game 2 to get underway. It's time to pass it to Dowsy and the Source.
It's the Vainglory8 Spring Champions up against the Vainglory8 Summer Champions here in Europe, fighting to be the Autumn Challengers champions and go to Worlds to be EU's hope. It's pretty exciting stuff. G2 versus SK. And after the success of Mouse running this Vox Fortress Lance composition yesterday, Source, Hundor actually tweeted out, Mouse using our composition. So he's claiming that they came up with it, and now they're looking to show us exactly why they came up with it.
Well, we'll see whether or not G2 can perform on it. They may have been the masterminds behind it, but it's possible Mouse were the ones who perfected it. So we'll see how well they managed to make it happen. We also have another Vox, and we've seen a lot of interesting Vox builds. Let's see what this one's going to be.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty excited to see whether or not G2 are going to change up the item builds. Yesterday, I'm the Doom, a very interesting build on the Fortress with the Null Wave, the Fountain, the Crucible, a very supportive jungle, Tension Bow, Aftershock, Tricky ran the double Tornado Trigger, which was very, very interesting as well with a breaking point and was it a Tension Bow? I'm not sure if I remember correctly. I think it was a Tension Bow.
Yeah, that sounds right.
It's going to be very interesting to see if G2, you know, obviously they've claimed on Twitter that they came up with it. I don't know whether or not that's between G2 and Mouse, but you know, if they did have kind of an idea of this composition, it's something that they like to run, then maybe they have a different idea how it's played, or maybe it's exactly the same.
Well, there's a lot of mobility, there's a lot of kiting. If your opponent decides they want to engage onto you, you can walk it back, but you also have plenty of chase potential. A wait for it plus attack of the pack, you can just hunt down a single target. And, you know, Cavalifar on this Scarf, yes, Scarf has plenty of damage, but it can be dangerous. Dark Potato in trouble.
In a bit of trouble, it is going to be that knockback from Keanu Nicole, but Tyra says, you want to come forward? I've got you. Hegman going to go forward. Hundor now, the one engaged upon it. Spitfire going to connect. Cavalifar, though, can't find the goop to find extra damage, but First Blood going over to Tyra's, just being an aggressive Blackfeather, looking to steal jungle, and Hundor, is he dead? Yes, he is! Hegman with that auto attack from Lyra, going to take down Hundor as well. SK 2-0.
This is a good week for Hegman. Having a good series of games. I'm surprised that G2 was willing to stick around that long. Yes, you don't want to miss out on any farm, but Hundor stuck around at very, very low health. Had already used the healing potion, so it's going to be a rough time for G2 for a little while, at least until they feel that they've got some of those item power spikes onto the Vox. Maybe once Hundor picks up an item or two, they can really get aggressive.
Cavalifar Going to just try and take over this lane. The thing that Scarf can do so well in the carry position is push consistently, and with the changes to turrets in 2.8, now 1,000 less health provides a lot of ability for the Scarf to take them down very quickly with the Spitfire and Goops. Looks like G2 may be changing things up a little bit. You've got that Storm Guard banner in the inventory of Dark Potato on this jungle fortress. So already a difference in item builds, but perhaps it's just for early jungle farming. May just decide to get an aftershock straight afterwards. Does look like G2 going to maybe be on a bit of a slow burner. It was the one thing that Mouse did very well in yesterday's games, is that they kind of took over with this composition. Were very aggressive early on.
Yeah, and I think it's possible that once he goes for the Storm Crown, like, the entire purpose is to keep up in the jungle, as Tyra's is already counter-jungling him again.
Yeah, and the Vision just not doing anything to help, unfortunately, there for G2. Not able to stop that one from happening, though they did get eyes on Tyra's. SK, at the moment, in a good spot. If they're able to kind of just keep the head above G2 and get Cavalifar towards a 3-4 damage item spike on this Guff, then they're going to have so much late game potential.
G2 stepping over into the bush. Nakoa was looking for a target and didn't find anything. Now is going to get a little bit of abuse from Hegman. I don't think that G2 really wants to pick their fight just yet. They took so much damage, and they have to be worried about, you know, Tyrus sneaking around the jungle, because the moment they step forward, Tyrus might come up from behind them. And Hondur also can't really clear the waves just yet. Scarf is reaching that point where he can pretty much instantly clear a wave. And Tyrus is going to continue to harass Dark Potato in the jungle.
Well, Tyrus is going to pull the attention of G2 down, but is fairly safe in doing so. The Frostburn will be completed here for Cavalifar. And on the other side, a Sora Blade comes through for Hondur and Kiana Nakoa. Dark Potato looking like he's going to go towards that Aftershock after all as his first item, just using the banner for the clear times. Hakeman on this Lyra, not opting in for a Crucible first, instead the Fountain. So something that North American Lyras tend to do, build that Crucible and just heavy health items for the extra heals. Instead, going to be pretty happy with a Fountain.
Yeah, a little worried about the possible Mortal Wound coming out from Dark Potato, but that's some good damage back into Tyrus. They don't manage to land the Impale. I'd be scared if I were SK.
You have to be very, very careful. The aggression that can come out of this composition, we already saw it yesterday in Mouse's game 1. Very, very quick, gets Fox in there, and the lands and the fortress, and you can just delete a single target, and that's exactly what they're going to look to do against Cavalifar's Scarf here. And I appreciate the Idris ban in the draft as well. You know, out of the 3 CP laners that SK were likely looking towards, since they picked up Black Feather already, Idris with a Frostburn, as Cavalifar loves to build, throws a Chakram through, rolls on back, and he's pretty safe, right? But once you remove that Idris from the draft, then you've got a Celeste and you've got a Scarf, both far less mobile in their ability to escape, and so a little bit easier to execute against.
So it does look like Hondur has gone with the opening Sorrow Blade, so I don't think we're seeing the double Tornado trigger just yet. I think that one might have been a tricky special in terms of interesting item builds. Surface Mask is going to be finished off by Tyrus. The Frostburn is there for Cavalifar. So we are seeing some of these items come online. We're getting closer to level 8 for some of these carries, so maybe we see some more significant damage coming out of Scarf, especially if the Spitfires continue to land on Hondur.
Yeah, no, the Spitfires have to be careful of them. How Cavalifar uses his goop as well, how Tyrus uses his on points. Good Giffian Wall, Tyrus able to escape. Dragon's Breath gonna come through, there's no CC to stop it. Hondur, he's burning alive, gonna throw the silence through, but the Fountain comes out. Tyrus looks for the kill, can't find it, but a Spitfire connects. Now it's Cavalifar trying to escape, but Keanu, he may go down. It's a double coming through for Cavalifar, and Hegman's not done yet. Portals forward, Dark Potato looks like he's in trouble, but the Spitfire doesn't connect, and that will be the end of the story there. SK able to find 2 in that fight.
Yeah, a great opening from G2, but they just couldn't manage to connect it, and reaching the point where Scarf gets scary, especially with the Dragon's Breath landing onto all of those targets, slowing everybody down. Hunter did a good job of being able to pick off Tyrus, but it was a little bit of a struggle. And you know, again, the opening on this Githian wall is just really, really good. Sets up the initial stun, but they were all standing on top of that group, and I don't think Hundor realized that just because there were so many bodies there, so many particle effects, a nice Spitfire to finish it off, and then, you know, a little bit of an overcommit from Ken and Nakoa.
Look at that damage onto Hundor there. The Spitfires doing so much work. It's going to force him to go back to base, and I think SK can actually get a turret off this if they play it right. Good block comes through from Keanu Nakoa on the Spitfire. That's going to mean that Hundor should be able to get back to the lane before this turret is affected too badly. G2 have to play this next little skirmish correctly. And they want to stop too much aggression from SK. And you can see SK moving back, but it's a 3-minute kill! Huge from Keanu. Tyras, though, where are you going? The Dragon's Breath's going to come around and a fountain to heal up. Hundor burning alive. Dark Potato trying to provide the team with a bit of respite. But G2, the damage is unreal onto them. They've already used their fountain. SK has their own, and Hundor gets sniped by Kavalafa. SK are dominating so far in the early game, and Hundor and G2 have just not made this composition work. A portal from Hegman. Keanu is dead. Hegman, newbie to the team, showing up huge and just providing the big plays to allow his team extra kills.
It looks so good for G2 every time. These amazing openings from Keanu Nakoa, but they just don't have the damage to follow up onto it. They're a much more of a slow roll composition. They need those breaking point stacks to build up for Hundor, and they're just never allowed to do that. The fight just doesn't go long enough.
It's going to be the gold miner going over to SK, and the gold lead that they have accumulated so far, Source, is huge at this 10-minute mark. They've got themselves a 3.5k lead. They've got Kavalafa up to that 3-item spike with that clockwork. Now looking for a broken myth. He's at 10 minutes, got 3 CP items. It's unreal. And at 12 minutes, it's possible he has the broken myth. If he has 4 CP items at 13 to 14 minutes, then SK are just playing at a pace that's just almost unstoppable.
So you mentioned at the beginning the ban out of the Idris, taking that out, taking away that kiting potential. But are you really going to want to use a composition like G2's, which is basically a run-at-me composition, into how much damage is coming out of those Spitfires and those goofs from Kavalafa? It's unreal how much damage he's able to do with just one of those combos. And the last 2-3 fights, it's just been Hundor, you know, standing on top of that, either, you know, being forced to position into that because of where Lyra is, or because he's kiting out the Blackfeather, and Tyrus is forcing him to run one direction or another. But it's just getting so difficult for Hundor to survive throughout these team fights, or to even dish out the damage to build up those breaking point stacks.
Yeah, he's currently struggling heavily in this matchup, and Kavalafa is just sniping continuously. Keanu and Nakoa are going to move on in, but this time it's an impale missing. Nash is going to shut down the fight immediately, and Keanu is going to take so much damage, so much punishment for missing. Oh, Hundor with Spitfire. Hegman dives on in, snares them all with the bright board, but the attack of the pack going to come out. Tyrus blocking up the impale with the Rose Offensive, but a silence comes through, and it silences 3. Dragon's Breath, here it comes! Kavalafa looking for Keanu, and he's going to burn him! And Hundor alive! It's a double for Tyrus, and it's the ace for SK.
Perfectly timed defense is coming out from SK. I thought G2 was going to be able to turn that. They finally managed to get the silence. They finally managed to get some of the pace going, the attack of the pack to come out. But SK just kite it back perfectly. They get good damage into the back line. Tyrus is continuously harassing Hundor, and that's just allowing Kavalafa to just line up all of those shots and land every single Spitfire.
The difference between the way that SK are playing this compared to Fnatic yesterday is huge. Look at that. Already the passage in, the snare, and then the disengage. The Dragon's Breath able just to turn fights around, and Tyrus, instead of having a cruel, just so much more threatening on this Blackfeather that G2 don't stand a chance. Incredible gameplay coming out of SK, incredible execution from them as well. And with this huge gold lead they have, 6,000, the broken myth getting closer and closer to reality for Kavalafa. It almost seems impossible for G2 to turn this around.
They need to get a serious engagement. They're going for it.
Looking for it, but can't find it. SK, Lyra gives them so much movement speed to just walk away with a single heal. That's just providing too much, I think, for the side of G2 to really deal with.
It looked like Dark Potato, well, you know, in that previous engagement might have actually gotten to Valfar, but there isn't any follow-up damage. And, you know, although he has the impulse, it's not going to be enough on this fortress to actually finish off Valfar, which means Hundor has to manage to kite around portions of the fight, and they haven't been able to do that. The gold miner will go over to the side of SK. The gold lead will continue to extend to 7k, and SK right now are having a dominating performance, and Hegman is just showing up today.
Yeah, sigils to get the team in and out of team fights. The portals have been on top of everything, and the ability to stop Fox and Fortress from re-engaging with the Bright Bulwark is huge. Look at this once more. SK disengaged. Impale, it misses. It's blocked up, and SK are looking to turn the fight around. The Dragon's Breath, Kiana able to stop it. Tyrus perhaps in a little bit of trouble, but he's looking for the kill, and he's gonna find it. It's gonna be Dark Potato looking for one, but they can't even find that. SK survive. Keanu, will he escape? No, he will not. And the ace is going to come through once more. Ace. 14 minutes, another ace. SK 12-1.
Great kiting out of SK, and again, Keanu Nakoa, he sets up what looks like a reasonably good team fight. Even after that Impale missed, he managed to cut the Dragon's Breath off. It looked like they were going to be able to do it, but there just isn't enough damage from the side of G2. Either Hundor needs to be positioned higher on the team fight so he can actually get the damage into Valfar, but every time he tries to do that, he even dived under that tower. I thought he might have had it, but not enough breaking point stacks, not enough damage. You know, has been forced to pick up that defensive item, has his Aegis, and it's so close for G2. You can see how much they could make this composition work, but they've been unable to execute it perfectly. And so far, it looks like Maus are the true masters of this strategy.
Yeah, G2 claiming to have invented it. Like you mentioned, perhaps it's Maus who perfected it. SK, broken myth on Cavalifar now. Tyra's so tanky with the war treads as well for the re-engage, disengage potential. Just coordinating with Hegman. Such great synergy coming out of the team at, you know, such short notice. The team bringing on Hegman only recently, but it seems like they've made it work fantastically. G2, this is the last hurrah for them. The Kraken spawned, and if they can't find a teamfight win, SK are going to take that Kraken and look to finish this series.
The big problem is SK's competition is allowing for them to both engage and to be able to just kite back and slow things down. G2 at this point, they need SK to overcommit to something because they've chased and they've chased and they've chased and never been able to fully connect. And Cavalifar is bold enough to step up pretty much into the front line, doesn't need Hegman in front of him, is happy to have him on the side, has that sustain, has all of that protection. And Cavalifar is just able to look G2 in the eye and say, I dare you to run it. And it just hasn't worked out.
And now with the no-wave gauntlet on Hegman, it's going to make things even more difficult for G2 to keep someone alive. Here's the gauge coming in, but the snare comes out and G2 just can't get there. The goop slows everyone down. The attack of the pack is dead, and G2's engage tool is gone. Now SK are free to just sit in the lane and push things up. G2 are forced to just watch as they do so.
Yeah, and Tyra's has had a good game, just continuing to pressure, got all of that early counter jungling. I definitely think that that made Dark Potato's life very, very difficult. They are going to consider the re-engage. Dark Potato's in trouble.
And look at where Keanu is. He's so far from the fight. Item silence goes out onto Hundor, burning alive, can't escape, can't use anything. It's a double for Cavalifar. And Hegman says, we want the triple. Cavalifar looking for the Spitfires. They connect. The goop, the Spitfire, a triple for Cavalifar, the master of the triple. They don't even need a Kraken at the moment. They're going to look to push on in with this minion wave coming down the lane. And SK are looking so strong this season. With Hegman by their side, SK going to take down the Vayne Crystal, and they're going to be our first finalist of week 1 of the autumn season.
An impressive 2-0 to come out of SK. They managed to run 2 great CP laning strategies, and I think Hegman has, you know, proven that he has earned the right to be here in the VG8.
Oh, for sure. Red Option has stepped up his game, and SK have found themselves a very valuable captain indeed. SK through to the finals here in week 1. Let's throw it back to Munch.
Well, the first game in this series was exceptionally close between these two teams. Second game in the series, less so. SK seem to have come into their stride now, and honestly, made that one look a lot easier than game one.
I think a lot of it also just came down to the composition play styles. Like, the composition from the side of G2 needed to get in the face, needed to be very aggressive onto what SK had, and they did a phenomenal job of just keeping them at arm's length, just keeping them at bay. Anytime they started to dive in, there was an immediate retreat, reposition from the side of SK, and then re-engage once they had overcommitted.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think the game was definitely won for SK in the draft this game. Last game was different. It was the execution that was a lot better, but this game SK came up with a much better draft and just followed through with their plan. You can see here Scarf's damage too when they started sieging on the turrets and on the characters. The poke he was able to output. It's such a strong comp with the sustain that's also coming through from Lyra. And whenever G2 tried to engage on SK, they were able to just kite away. Thing is, whenever SK got close, they get punished. The one kill they gave away that game was when they got close, which was on Blackfeather. So you have to respect the Fortress because the burst damage coming out from him is very strong still.
Yeah, and then we have a replay of a fight that happened at 11 minutes and 30 seconds into this game where SK started to turn what they had in terms of a lead into more of an actual victory.
Yeah, and this was another one where they get a good amount of damage down. They have to retreat once G2 decides to go aggressive, but then they back off far enough, and these Dragon Breaths from Kvalifar were on point. And this was something we talked about. The Scarf was fairly good into the Fortress before the draft, or during the draft, I guess, more accurate. But one thing we realized partway through the game was, oh yeah, there's nothing for the side of G2 to stop these Dragon's Breaths aside from a Githian wall stun. That's the only method they had to stop a Dragon's Breath once it got started. And they were constantly just forcing the fights in the lane against the Lance, so we didn't have those opportunities to cancel out the Dragon's Breath.
And we had another similar situation around just beyond the 13-minute mark where we saw them go for this disengage and then have another re-engage and set up these fights perfectly.
Yeah, I mean, you can see here, they just kind of, that block was so crucial because it denied the root. Had he not blocked that root, Vox would have been able to kill Scarf, and that would have ended the team fight right there. You could see that this is one of the only times that Githian wall actually comes through on Scarf, and that denies him his ultimate, which is why the team fight didn't end as cleanly as other team fights. Fortress ends up diving in to try to get the kill, but he doesn't manage to get it, and at the end, Lyra manages to find Lance, and they get the ace and take Kraken afterwards, I believe.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, it was so close to a fight where Scarf goes down, right? They were that close to finishing off that Scarf. And in that situation, it's kind of like the G2, it's kind of like game one, where if the Celeste dies, suddenly things change up, but couldn't quite make that happen. Now we do have a replay of the final fight of the game. This is how SK managed to finish things off.
And again, Dragon's Breath onto 2 targets, completely unblocked, and that was with the Broken Myth had finally come through as well. So just nothing that the side of G2 could do at this stage.
One thing to mention here is the builds on G2's side. We saw different builds both on Fortress and Vox from the last time we saw this composition, and that could have been a factor to why their composition didn't work as well. Vox didn't go for the TT build, and Fortress didn't go for the Tension Bow double proc, and on top of that,